Hello, everyone. I see people entering the room. Welcome. We are going to get started in about 1 minute. Make sure we have our maximum time. Feel free to come off your, onto the screen if you want. If you're more comfortable with it off, that's fine as well. We are going to be recording this. To be respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, wherever you are, or afternoon, depending on what side of the coast you're on at the moment. I know we have some people registered as far as Hawaii and also local to us here in DC. So I just wanted to say welcome. My name is Tiveeda Stovall, and right now we're going to spend a little time together this next hour to talk about what it means to do congressional advocacy and appropriations. We feel this is an important time right now. Congress is in recess. And one of the things that really came to my mind putting this together is even as a former nonprofit director, I had no idea about some of these things. And I thought I was very well versed in civic engagement. So, without further ado, we're going to go through a lot of information, but I want you to rest assured you're going to get a copy of the webinar as well as a toolkit. We will also have some time. I'm most excited about our guest speaker today, and I'll introduce her in a little bit, but uh, would love to hear where people are coming from. If you have any questions, please put them. I think, oh, yes, we don't have a question thing, but if you want to put it in the chat, hopefully the chat is open to put in some questions and we can review them either at the end of the presentation or during or afterwards and be able to send a more uh, complete response. So we're going to go ahead and so just a little quick bit about Griffin Legacy. Griffin Legacy is my small business, consulting business that I started about 7 years ago now. And we specialize in social impact work with both educational entities and social service entities. So we really want to kind of bridge gaps in communities and systems where we think that they work better together. And so I created this as um, a a legacy to my family who actually started some of the first Black schools in the South, in Louisiana and Mississippi. So for me, it's a tribute to them. So it's a little bit about our organization, and you'll get more when you get the toolkit. So, and again, please feel free to come off if you'd like, and we can have a conversation, which we will in a minute. So one of the things I wanted to do first, let's see, I'm trying to see if I can get my slides and this thing to work. I just want to go over our quick agenda today. We'll talk really quickly about what are the webinar objectives, what is it to do advocacy work, and that means in any type of organization that you might be a part of. That could be for-profit, small business, solo entrepreneur, We're going to just kind of get a little quick study of what that means and what types of advocacy is out there, which I think a lot of people um, don't really, they think they know what advocacy is, but there's so many ways to define it. We also will be talking about appropriations and what congressional appropriations are about. And I really encourage all of you to explore the possibility, whether you're a nonprofit or for profit, because even as a for profit, you can partner with nonprofit entities to do a project that is meaningful and impactful to different congressional members. Finally, we'll do a little bit of building your case for all types of advocacy work that you'll do. And then we'll just briefly touch on some next steps if you'd like to engage and find other ways to move whatever project or possibilities forward. So just really quickly, we have four objectives. We're going to talk about really quickly about advocacy, lobbying, and partisan political activity. We're going to look at some of the basic rules um, for advocacy work for nonprofits and small businesses. We're going to understand the basics of federal appropriations, and hopefully we'll have a little time to begin to craft clear and credible advocacy requests, depending on who you want to reach out to, that can help further your work along. So really quickly, I just want to give you a little bit of some of the things that I think a lot of times we are so quick to want to get things done. And trust me, I'm as guilty as anybody around that. I have run both um, and I don't even know if I introduced myself as Tiveeda Stovall, but I'm the director and founder of Griffin Legacy. But I also used to run a nonprofit. So I have this small business that I love and adore, but I also ran a statewide nonprofit in California for 10 years in education. And so I can see what's going on in both worlds and bridge those gaps that we often have. But one of the things I realized, no matter what type of industry you're in, advocacy work is very important. But we also need to know are we ready to do advocacy work? Where do we need to kind of step back and get prepared before we do the work itself? And so I just wanted to put up a little kind of a snippet of the general questions of a much longer and more involved assessing your advocacy readiness. And I want you to kind of just look at the four questions that are here. There's one on, does your organization advocate for or against legislation at any of the following levels of government? Um, and it's federal, state, local, and local could even mean something like a city council, school board, whatever it might be. Does your organization engage in executive branch advocacy at the following levels of government? Does your organization have a policy agenda? And does your organization's, one of the most important ones is, does your organization's board support your organization's advocacy activities? So I want you to take about, a minute to look at those questions, and I'm going to ask how many people or feel like they can answer yes to half of those questions right now. I hope I'm saying your name right. Annalie, is there a way for the shared screen to be larger? Okay, I don't know. Let me see. I don't know how you're seeing it. Hmm. Let me see what I can do. Hold on. I'll stop the share. I'm not sure if it's a side by side. Ah, okay. So let's see if I can do this and make it bigger because there are definitely some important things coming up and I don't want anyone to miss that. How's that? Better? Hope so. Good, thank you. Okay, so I'm just readjusting my own um, ability to see. Okay. And everybody can see the screen still? It's perfect. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. So how, so when people are looking at this, anybody can come off and just let me know. I think it might be in the chat here. Let me see what to say side by side. Okay, great. Can anybody say yes to any of these questions right now? Like, for instance, does any of your organizations have a policy agenda? Anybody can unmute if they'd like. Not yet. Yes. Yeah, not yet. I can imagine. A lot of places I do know, especially if you're nonprofit, they don't have a policy agenda. But that's something that we can actually help you with in the future. So, one of the things that I really want you to understand is the difference between advocacy and lobbying. A lot of times we have nonprofits who, and I'll tell you, I've been on several national nonprofit boards where they did not believe that they could even approach anyone in their congressional offices or sometimes even their local offices to talk about what they're doing. And I assured them that that was not the case. Unfortunately, wasn't quite believed. So, unfortunately, I feel like they've missed out on some really wonderful possibilities. So, I really wanted to set up here the definition of what is advocacy and what is lobbying. So, advocacy is an action that speaks in favor of your cause. It supports your mission. It defends the work that you're doing, and it really talks about what is you're doing on behalf of others. Lobbying is a form of advocacy, and there's a saying, and let me see if I can get this right, that all lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. So that's something I want you to take away with today, that all this stuff, even lobbying, which often has some negative connotations, especially in the nonprofit world, is actually advocacy. The difference is that when you're lobbying, you're actually asking for a direct influence of a bill to be passed, funding to be had, and it still doesn't mean that you're not able to do it. It's just how you do it and how you approach it. We have a toolkit that you're going to receive that actually helps you a little bit break down these into what are actual activities that are allowed by nonprofits and others when it comes to advocacy and lobbying. I want to give you a little bit of a preview of that right now. So these are, and I know this is very small right here, but you'll see these bigger in the toolkit. But this literally talks about each type of organization, that major organization that's out there, both in the nonprofit and social welfare world, as well as businesses and pass-through entities. So I know it's small because you're seeing 2 pages at once, but what you're going to see is there's one on, there's a little section on 501c3s, which I believe the majority of people who registered for this are a part of, but that's not the only one that folks here. There's 50C4s, which are considered social welfare organizations. Some of you have LLCs. And some of you in that LLC world have it designated as an S Corp, a C Corp, and some as sole proprietorships, or you might have a partnership. So each one of them has very distinct ways of how both the law and the IRS look at your advocacy work and what you have to report. We're not going to get into those kind of details because one, we don't have a lawyer here. And I always tell everyone that no matter what you do, when you start to think about doing lobbying part of work or even the beginning of some more serious advocacy congressionally, I would definitely make sure that you are talking to legal counsel just to run past what your idea and your plan might be. So do we have any questions right now? I'm going to take a little quick temperature. Anybody? Okay. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. Could you repeat the question? I was just wondering if anybody had any questions at this point. Wonderful. And if you do, you can put it in the chat if we don't see it right away. We'll get back to it. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, well, actually, let's go back. Actually, I don't know what happened to a slide. Something disappeared. I wanted to kind of take a, before we do this one, I just wanted to ask people, what do you think are different ways to do advocacy? Like when you hear the word advocacy, what comes to mind? And this one, please, welcome to unmute yourself and give us an example. I'd love that.
Hi.
Hello.
When I think of advocacy, sometimes I think about increasing awareness around things that may not be um, common knowledge sometimes.
Absolutely. Educational materials, educational endeavors, even something like a podcast can be considered advocacy work. What is your name, by the way?
Wakili.
Wakili, nice to meet you. Thanks for
Thank you.
that.
Nice to meet
Anybody
you.
else have any examples of what advocacy might mean or a form of advocacy?
Hi, I'm Annalise. Um, would it be maybe like sharing things that maybe I work for a nonprofit, so like maybe sharing things that the population you're serving, for example, is like struggles maybe or like things like that, like with a politician, like local politician.
Perfect. Perfect example. Yes. So basically, kind of you can think of that as storytelling and storytelling as a form of research. So your organization is always collecting stories about the people you're serving and culminating that in some form, whether that might be data in numbers or maybe in a year-end report. But all of that and reporting on that is advocacy work that can actually lead to some lobbying down the line. So that's a great example. I'll give you one more example. When I worked with high schoolers and middle schoolers around doing advocacy work and they were actually doing some advocacy work in their schools, we actually learned how to do an op-ed. So they learned how to do an op-ed to write to their local newspaper or their school newspaper, some of the things that they were doing or things that they were concerned about or wanting some more assistance with. So that was one way that we actually did advocacy work, kind of starting off in the younger grades was to do op-ed work. And a lot of people don't realize that some of that is the beginning of grassroots advocacy. So there's more formalized advocacy work, but then there's also grassroots advocacy work. Sorry about that. Somebody was just about to come to the door. All right. So one of the things and we're going to just really talk quickly about appropriations right now, a clear, concise definition, because one of the things when we're talking about advocacy, there is a range of things you can do. So we listed a few of those just right now, but one of the ways we really want people to kind of start thinking about their advocacy work, especially during these times where budgets have been cut for many social programs, and community initiatives, is to look towards congressional appropriations. And we definitely have some people here on the call that have already been very involved in congressional appropriations. But I just want to set it up a little bit before we get our wonderful guest speaker and expert to help us out, to find out a little bit more about what it means. So, basically congressional appropriations, it happens once a year. We're going to go through and talk about the cycle of it in a little bit, but I want you to understand, kind of get a chance to read this definition. It states that no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. So, in short, there is a whole process where the act of appropriations means that our legislators are giving funding to certain initiatives that the Treasury, and once things are passed, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Once things are passed, that funding is then gifted. I won't say, maybe I shouldn't say gifted, but is actually then distributed to different organizations that were considered um, pass through their legislation. Now, there is a whole thing where you may not get things passed, but we're kind of waiting on that now. So we'll talk a little bit about it. I know I'm being a little bit vague, but it's more because there's a whole cycle of what appropriations means. And I think you have a better concept of it when we're talking to our fantastic, wonderful guest speaker, Saira Bhatti, who is a former congressional staffer. And I'm going to stop our share right now so we can actually have her come on. And we're going to just have a little conversation about what it means to have appropriations and how that connects to what we're talking about today. So I'd love to welcome you, Saira. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm very grateful that you're here because you have been in the room where it happens, to quote the wonderful Hamilton musical. But I wanted to just ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your role as a former congressional staffer.
Sure. So I spent about 7 years on the Hill by way of a district office. So um, as a lot of you might know, your members of Congress and your senators will have, their office on the Hill in Washington, D.C., in one of, the big buildings like Rayburn or Cannon or the Hart Building over in the Senate, right? And then they have their local offices in the districts that they represent. Um, and those are called district offices. So I worked out of those. I worked out of a Northern Virginia district, so still close to DC, still close to the Hill, and getting that exposure. And I primarily handled constituent casework, so helping constituents navigate issues primarily with immigration, but a lot of other issues would come up too. So with Department of State, with USCIS, Department of Justice, the IRS, and just helping them navigate the complex bureaucracy and the waters of federal agencies and representing, working on behalf of the member to help them navigate that and find solutions to problems that they may be facing. And so also building relationships with constituents, with small businesses, with organizations who, wanted to come in and share concerns or share things that they wanted our office to stay aware of and having, event planning and outreach. So just managing a lot of relationships, a lot of stakeholders, and, keeping that, we are public servants, so serving the public as best as we can.
No, that's great. And I think it really sheds light a little bit on, the things we're talking about today, which is advocacy and appropriations. So, can you tell me a little bit about how constituents would interface with the congressional person? Can you share a little bit about the advocacy that nonprofits and small businesses might bring to the office and how that went?
Yeah, so we had a lot of requests because we covered quite a few counties and there's a lot of different needs. Some areas were more rural, some areas are more urban. And so how constituents would interface with the member sometimes would just be a simple phone call, and a staffer like me or an intern or someone would take that call. A lot of times people would be calling on behalf of a nonprofit or a small business or an organization, and they would be requesting a meeting or, requesting an email for the scheduler and that's a pro tip, calling your district or your DC office and asking, can I get the email for the scheduler? Is they'll give it to you. We have an email specifically for that, and you can, set up and request a meeting there. And so sometimes if the member themselves or the person, who's representing you isn't available, a member of staff will come to see you. And there's also district work weeks regularly throughout the year, and especially through August recess when members are not in session and they're back home in their districts. That's a great time to set up meeting with your member locally. Because remember, as a nonprofit, as a small business, you are a constituent. You are part of that electorate, and members of Congress and senators are taxpayer funded, and you are entitled to their time, and they are responsible to listen to you. And we as staff try to help them with that. So a bit about the advocacy and nonprofits. Again, lots of different kinds of, from abuse shelters to universities, to people who are doing like landscaping and construction and sharing their concerns about how it's hard to find labor, to human rights organizations. We did a lot of work in one office about the Uyghurs, so there was a lot of advocacy around that. And so all kinds of issues and organizations would come seeking time, and more often than not, they would get that time, if not from the member, then from a staffer on their behalf, and we would make sure to get those issue areas and items passed along, and to keep an eye on, any legislation that they thought was relevant or, necessary to support them to do their work.
No, that's great. You know, if you don't mind holding on for a moment, I want to talk a little bit about some of the specific pieces of appropriation, because I think now that we have kind of this idea of what it means to just be a person in an organization and being able to reach out to your congressional member, I want to now go back to our definition of, hold on, let me see if I can share the screen again. Oh, this is fun. Sorry, there's so many little pieces here. Okay, so if we go back to our screen, and we look at what congressional appropriations is defined as. So a little bit of that aha moment for me this year was, oh my gosh, I had heard of things called earmarks and congressional, I heard of big companies like, and these are people that I was working nearby. We weren't working in the same organization, but they were Shell Corporation, you know, um, all these big, you know, gasoline, oil companies, they got earmarks from Congress to do things. So I just assumed that those are the people who got the money. And we often hear about that. But what I didn't realize is that when I was running my little, well, my not so little nonprofit, but a nonprofit in California, that I could have been given appropriations funding to help further my mission along. And we had a very large, group of people we were working with. We were working with young people. We were working with schools. And so for me, this part of our webinar is so important to talk about what can happen with, um, appropriations funding. And you just talked about the women's shelter and all these other possible things. So I just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about what does it mean when people are applying for this? And we're going to talk about the timeline of it, but what did it mean to be in your office during a time of people doing their appropriations request?
Yeah, I mean, I also worked for a member who was on the Appropriations Committee, so I think it was very it was even more, I guess, like intense of a time, knowing that she actually sat on that committee as well. And it was always busy. It was hard for me to get even, I personally didn't work directly with the appropriations process, but I worked with the people in my office who did. And they were always very busy and they took, the requests they got very seriously. They, were busy filling out paperwork. It was hard for me to get, you know, um, in touch with some people, and they'd be like, well, it's appropriation season, so they're kind of busy right now. So it's kind of like an understood chaos that would happen, because obviously not everyone's going to get what they request, and it depends how much funding is available, how many projects, can you apply for or request for, and that can be tricky. But I think what was exciting was seeing like the full circle of it, like staffing my boss on like events or tours. I remember George Mason University had received some support and funding. And, I remember them thanking my boss for getting them funding for things. And that was very exciting because then they also get to show what they're working on because of the funding and what they get to continue to work on. Is it clinics? Is it, research? And then that's very exciting. And so also seeing, like, for example, there was a veterans nonprofit that wanted to get affordable housing built for veterans. And they had asked for $1.5 million and they didn't get the 1.5 million, but they got $1 million. And I think $1 million is better than zero. and it wasn't the 1.5, but the fact that they got that money and they asked and they made their case and they showed, what the need was and they were able to get it, it's a pretty powerful thing for a community that was in need. So those were some of my memories of working in that environment and also seeing it come to fruition and how exciting that was for people and constituents to see like, oh, we are part of this process and we are entitled to the ask. Whether or not we get it is a different story because of, how much is available, but it doesn't mean it's a lost cause. And I would say it helps to keep up with your relationship and build that relationship with your public officials and keep that up, not just that year, but throughout the year, especially seeing if you do win, then funding, you can show like, this is what we're doing with what efforts you made and like, keep that cycle of communication and relationship building going.
Oh, absolutely. And I think another important takeaway is when you have those relationships, it doesn't stop or start with appropriations. You can actually have them write a letter of support for other funding endeavors that you might be doing to support your mission. And, just to your point, this past year, in kind of my newfound knowledge, just reaching out to the number of organizations I did, 3 out of the 4 applicants actually got their appropriations funding. And that was so exciting. There was one organization that didn't get theirs, but there was another one who had asked again, probably I think for 650,000, and they got a 500,000. And I want people on the webinar to understand these are not gigantic organizations. Usually these are people that are known in their local communities for the work that they're doing in their local communities and are leveraging their relationships with their congressional members to say, hey, this is how we're supporting the constituents in your community, but and who, you're wanting to make life a better place for. So it's very exciting possibilities. So I really want to thank you so much, Saira, for this insight. And please, if we're going to talk a little bit more about appropriations and some of the things people can do. And if you want to kind of jump back in, please be able to share those insights with us. Does anyone have any questions right now for Saira? It's a great opportunity to do this. All right. This is so funny. It reminds me of when I was in I was doing what is it called? Helping with a program during the COVID pandemic and trying to get people to stop. But I completely understand because there's many webinars I think I've been completely silent on. So let's move on. Let me go ahead.
I
I
actually,
wanted,
sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry. I just
oh,
thought of a question. I was trying to think of a
no,
question.
no, don't feel sorry. Hold on. I'm trying to get back to you. All right.
Uh,
Please go ahead,
Thank
Emily.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I guess a question I have. So we've had a congresswoman come visit our organization, and actually she's going to come again next week. And we've I guess I don't know if there's because I'm kind of new to, talking with like politicians and stuff like that. Is there like something that would be like further, I guess, than that to like build the relationships or like something to like differentiate besides just having like the congressperson come visit or just I guess yeah, I just didn't know if there's any other ideas or like what stands out to individuals like that.
I think that's really great if she's
Mhm.
visited before and she's coming again, because the schedules are so packed, like to the minute, that I think you're doing a really great job if she's, um, I think you're kind of at the peak level. I think just sending, maintaining the relationship. Like, I think that's the best thing you can do personally. And, every member's personality and style is different. If she's like the type that likes to visit, having a visit set and like new updates or something interactive, or I know some people like to do little town halls of all their staff and organization where they can set up like a conversation where it's just members of your organization and the volunteers, and she could kind of have a town hall with them. I know some people have done that. So maybe just changing up the format of the visits,
Okay.
because I think that's really good proximity, the fact that she's
Mhm.
physically coming. And then if there's ever joint events or there's ever a town hall where you can be present, um, so that it's like a back and forth and not just her coming, but you're also being part of, you know, the wider district and the wider community. That's also something I would say, I would hope your members hosting town halls, if they're teletown halls or in-person town halls, but sending a couple members to represent, just to be present. Um, I hope that's helpful. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered.
No, that is helpful. Yes. Thank you. I didn't think about like also us like going, I guess that makes sense. So yeah, thank you. Super helpful.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
no, and that's perfect. The only thing I just want to caution people about is that whoever's in that elected role, go to, but if it's an election year, make sure that you have parity with all the candidates. Because if you are a nonprofit and go to one person's campaign event or town hall, you want to make sure that you go to all the other candidates and have the same type of presence if it's available, because that is one of the ways that you can, there are very few ways that you can get in trouble as a nonprofit being involved with candidates, and that would be seen as one, and it's specifically around those election years. I have some things in the toolkit to kind of help people guide you with what are the do nots. So you will find that once you get your toolkit. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So I wanted to go ahead and quickly share. These are the appropriations committee. So a lot of the stuff, if you are talking to somebody like me, I'm going to be mostly working with people, and but not always, but mostly working with people in subcommittee 8, which is on this list, which is labor, health, human services, education, and related agencies. So, but I did have one appropriations that actually was aligned more with subcommittee on agriculture, rural development, and that was just amazing because this organization's main goal wasn't necessarily agriculture, but they wanted to do something around food security for their clients. And instead of going through the subcommittee on labor, they went through agriculture. So one of the things that I'm just showing you this, what those committees are. There is in-depth information on what each committee um, will fund and what is their mission and priorities, and it can change from year to year. So whatever might have been so we're in Congress 119. In January, we're going to have Congress 120. It's going to be so each year, and we're going to get to that now. Let me go ahead, is to find out what the priorities of each of these committees might be. So this is a little bit of the appropriations timeline. And right now we're kind of what I call the limbo time. So let's start. This is the whole appropriations timeline in a nutshell. And although appropriations is part of the Constitution, there is nothing stating in the Constitution that it has to happen every year. But it is now kind of part of what our Congress does every year, although the timing can vary. So right now, typically what happens is that in February, and of course, this is all a big cycle, but the president submits a budget to Congress saying what his funding priorities are. And we've seen a lot of that on the news in different ways about, like, oh, this is what's happening with education cuts or other funding cuts with, CDC or something like that. So the president will come up with a budget. Um, it, it's sent to Congress, both House and the Senate, then develop their own budget resolutions so that usually what they do is like, okay, so usually appropriations requests for members of the House are due around March. Now it changes each year. And for the Senate, it's about April each year. They will go through after the requests are made by different constituent organizations. They will have their staffers, as Saira has explained, will go through each application and decide what is something that the congressperson will put forward. So for instance, even like senators might say, well, I'm this year going to be kind of focusing on um, labor. And there was a lot last in this past fiscal year. Well, to get funded for FY27, that was very much workforce development focused and forward. So we saw a lot of workforce development funding sources. If you are interested in seeing some of who got funded or got their request approved, I can definitely send you a little bit of your congressperson's approved appropriations. But right now we're in that limbo stage because each subcommittee is in the process of voting on their budgets for and what gets passed and not. Technically, we're supposed to know prior to October 1st, and then ideally the president signs the appropriations bill and those entities will get their funding through the Department of Treasury. We may not be there, and that's when we actually sometimes have that wonderful thing called we don't have the budget passed by October 1st, and then we start seeing things like what most people will see as the federal shutdown. So that is just a little bit brief kind of synopsis of what appropriations timeline might look like. You'll have definitely more in your toolkit. And I will get the link to you. I was going to see if I could have time to do the toolkit, but we probably won't have time to kind of run through it, but you're going to get the whole toolkit which has a lot more in-depth information and kind of spelling out different ways of advocacy, things on, definitions of how you can go about, looking at your legislative interactions. So those will be in your toolkit that you'll receive. And one of the things I just want to mention here is a little bit about, I really love this. Oops, let me go back up. So it's 10 elements of impactful lobbying. And that's because these actually kind of flow together. I want you to really pay attention to this. This is fully in your toolkit, but these 10 steps have been seen as effective ways of not only doing some basic advocacy work, but also through lobbying and appropriations can really help you along the way if you kind of do part of it. So it's identifying an issue, researching your issue, creating fact sheets, brand the issue. And that means having those vis visual messages, marketing. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Those are things that, uh, I would say to anyone doing this kind of work for their organization, you do not have to spend a lot of money to get these things done, but you do have to spend the time and the effort and really think about doing it in a collaborative form. So, on that note, map supporters and detractors. You want to know who are the people in your network who can really help support your message when you're trying to do effective lobbying, and then who are going to be people who are going to detract. So, yes, we all know that there are some great things happening out there with different small businesses that are social impact businesses and nonprofits, but there's always someone in some entity that might be against it. So be ready and prepared for that as well. And I think even I am guilty of that in the past, is not really looking at who those detractors were. Form coalitions, develop those educational materials, launch a media campaign, approach those elected officials. And, it could be someone in your local community, but for our purposes here, we're talking really federal, congressional. Now, let me just quickly say, there is lobbying and advocacy work you can do in your states, with your state legislators, but that is a whole nother thing. And every state is very different. And actually, there are guidebooks specifically about what you have to do in your state that is very different than some of the rules that you would have to do for your congressional leaders on Capitol Hill. And then, of course, monitor your progress. And then one of the things that's also in your toolkit, that I want you to know about is that we have a little bit of uh, a, a layout of just beginning your advocacy plan. What is something that you need to change or something that you want to increase for your organization? Who do you need to influence that? It might need to start, even the influence might have to start within your organization. Um, as I said before, I really worked hard with my fellow board members to get them to think about doing some lobbying work to get the word out about amazing mission that we were accomplishing with young people across the country. So maybe our first thing is we need to influence people within our circle before we even go out to our legislature. But those are people we can actually add to the list. How can we influence them? What do we do? By whom and by when? Managing risk and monitoring success, as well, because you want to kind of notate those successes. So let's see. So, and then just a quick word before we kind of break to take some quick questions, final questions. I just want to kind of give you a heads up on what are some of our future planning that we recommend. One is really want people to at least complete a detailed assessment of advocacy needs and readiness to really understand what the legal and IRS requirements are. You'll have a little bit of that based on your entity type in the handbook that you're going to get, or the toolkit. We actually help people develop a 12-month calendar of advocacy activities and deadlines. Say, for instance, you're ready and you want to do appropriations. This is the time to start for FY 28 funding, because we're about to hit our, midterm elections, and the next thing you know, we're going to have a brand new Congress. So those are things we would advise to kind of start now. Keep current on pertinent legislative news that are about your industry or mission, and prepare for appropriations requests. And then again, partner with Griffin Legacy to help you out with your future planning. That's what we're here for. So I want to kind of then now open it up for some final questions in this time. Anybody have any questions? You can unmic and ask away.